which was established in February 2020. About when? It was launched in Feb 2020, and the forum is basically for IACC women members to network with the following objectives. We've set out and charted these objectives for the empowerment of women, to create an impactful network in order to strengthen influence of women in different diverse backgrounds from different walks of life, to discuss and address challenges faced by women professionals and entrepreneurs, again, from different sectors, from different segments, be it the social arena, industry, agriculture, services domain, to create a platform for knowledge sharing on basis of the business expansion or career growth or diversifications, etc. We set out a framework which is basically for IACC members, as well as we welcome non-members to attend this as well. WIN initiative has been led by myself, Prajakta Kotasthane, Rishu Sharma, along with the Pune chapter committee members. We've set out an objective and a goal of having at least 4 programs per year, 1 per quarter. We are in fact trying to exceed that target. Our sessions are going to be via different modes. It could be panel discussion, it could be interaction with the industry, women leaders, like we have 2 of them today, mentors, company visits to different organizations run, established and led by women, seminars on relevant topics, etc. We formed a core committee which will focus on the objectives that have been laid out. And the committee is comprising of myself, Rujuta Jagtap, Prajakta Kotasthane, Rishu Sharma, Shilpa Pofre, and Dr. Kiran Bala. And we would like and urge more and more women and invite them all to actually be a part of this core committee as well. So the core committee is comprising of these, and it's open to taking on women as members. We've conducted events starting February. The first one we did was work-life balance in today's world, which was held on 29th of July and has been very, very well received by not only Pune-based members, but also you can say the pan-India ecosystem. The next one up was this one, which is basically building women around us and the role of finance in our industry as well as on the personal front. This was again in October 2020 and very well received. And today is the third event, which is basically breaking the glass ceiling. The session which has been looked forward to as well and talked about as well by many women leaders. And today we have 2 such stalwarts, Ms. Bhavana Bindra, who's a director and the board member and a writer and speaker, as well as Ms. Jayanthi, who's the chairperson of Astra Consultants. We've got these 2 stalwarts to talk to us today about their experiences, their journeys, and how they've been successful in breaking the glass ceiling. This session is going to be ably moderated by our Vice Chairperson, Ms. Prajakta Kotasthane, the MD of Shriram Rubber. With this, I hand over to Prajakta to give the opening remarks and introduce our speakers for today. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone, and handing over to you, Prajakta.
Thank you, Rujuta. Good evening, everyone. I'm Prajakta, and I'm happy to be the moderator for today's session, which is on a very important and relevant topic for women, breaking the glass ceiling. While organizations, be it in India or globally, have made strides in increasing gender diversity and inclusion at the workplace, women continue to face challenges. Typically, it's about balancing family and work, extended breaks, or limited flexibility at the workplace, or even an implicit bias because of social and cultural factors. Taking it a step further, women in leadership positions are very few and far between. In fact, a 2019 Credit Suisse study indicates that in India, female representation on company boards is about 15% versus the global average of 25%. In such a scenario, I think it is indeed an accomplishment for women to reach these leadership positions. With that said, I am pleased to welcome our 2 guest speakers for today, Bhavana Bindra and Jayanthi, both of whom have succeeded in breaking the proverbial glass ceiling. So welcome Bhavana and Jayanthi, and thank you for taking the time out to participate in our event today. So both Jayanthi and Bhavana's detailed profiles were shared along with the invite, and I hope the participants have had a chance to go through them. I'll take I'll say a few sentences about their experience. Bhavana is a director and board member of several companies, and she's also a gifted writer and speaker. She graduated from IIM Bangalore, and while she has many achievements to her credit, being recognized by Economic Times 40 under 40 business leaders and India Inc.'s rising women leaders, I think was definitely a feather in her cap. Jayanthi is a chairperson and co-founder of Astra Consultants Private Limited. And in her vast global experience of 20 plus years, she has led several projects, mainly in the banking and financial services space, after which she co-founded Astra. And as part of their CSR, Jayanthi works in areas of girl child education, women's health, and employment for the differently abled. So Jayanthi, Bhavana, considering your background and your experience, y'all are, and the fact that y'all are strong proponents of gender diversity, y'all are apt speakers for today, and we're looking forward to interacting with you. For the participants, the agenda will mainly be opening remarks by both our speakers, followed by a moderated Q&A session for about 35 to 40 minutes. And the last 10 minutes are for questions from the audience. Any question you have, you may type it in the chat box in Zoom. So welcome once again, and thanks to all for joining. Over to you, Bhavana, for your opening remarks.
Thanks, Prajakta. Thanks, Rujuta, for having me here, and really appreciate you sharing a little bit about myself, and of course, Jayanthi, a very established person. I think the title, when you first shared it, that this is the topic we'd like to talk about breaking the glass ceiling. I wasn't sure, I was like, yeah, I mean, fine, do we really need to talk about this? But the point is, I think several of us, when, especially when we are brought up in a family where, there's not exactly gender roles defined. So, women or girls are considered, as equal to boys. When you come into the corporate world, you're probably not even thinking about, things like the glass ceiling, or at least when I did, I wasn't thinking. And I think it's true for several of us. We realize the glass ceiling. So the glass ceiling obviously is like this invisible barrier, which you only realize when you hit against it. It's almost like that limit beyond which, when you want to go or you think you can go, you're not able to. And it's not because people want to discriminate against you. It's almost like this subconscious, or even this whole piece around unconscious bias that we hear about. It's in us. It's part of how we've been brought up. It's part of our society, our culture, but not just in India. I mean, this is across the world, because gender is one of the most visible areas of diversity that we've been talking about. In fact, the glass ceiling applies even beyond gender, in minorities. And you wouldn't say that women are minorities, but yes, I think at different points in life, people face the glass ceiling, or women face the glass ceiling. And I think the intent, like I said, while may not be discrimination, there are policies, attitudes, which kind of, encourage these biases, which hence lead to, this often used term we call the merit trap. So people want similar people to themselves, right? And the more you want similar people, the more averse you are to actually bringing in women, because you've just seen men all over, right? So to me, I think we need to keep in mind that it's taken a long time for this ceiling to establish itself, centuries perhaps. And while you may be lucky if you've had somebody who's shattered it way before you did, so you don't, kind of bump yourself against it. But yes, it may hurt a little bit, but it's definitely worth it, shattering it and getting past it, because there's a world of opportunity out there. So I would, really love to encourage everybody to not get bogged down by it. If you realized it, very good, because it's already past you, and you need to just take the next step to get shattering and breaking it and going beyond it.
Thanks, Jayanthi. And like you rightly said, it's more an implicit or an unconscious bias. And you feel it more if you're brought up in an environment where, the differentiation doesn't exist. So that's an interesting perspective. Jayanthi, over to you. I think you're on mute, Jayanthi.
Thank you. Thank you, Prajakta. Thank you, Rujuta. Thank you, Bhavana, for having me over. Thank you, IACC Pune team, all the people behind the screen who are making this happen for us. Appreciate it. It's a very interesting topic. Yeah, though prima facie you want to say, I don't think that exists. I think it goes much deeper than that. And once we were discussing and thought of putting across a few notes to talk about it, you realize how this topic could be a really, really long one and a never-ending one. Bhavana was telling us just now that we generally seek comfort in the likes of us. There are various sayings to that effect, which says birds of same feathers flock together. This was not designed, but it so happens that I am called not necessarily the boy in the house, I'm called the tomboy in the house. So you never thought, when you were brought up, you never thought you were a different gender, studied in co-education schools, so you never realized a boy is so different from a girl. All of them were allowed inside the house. So I used to look at my friends who used to be only girls or only boys and have that stigma saying, you're a boy and I am a girl. You don't know that at all when you have been brought up in that fashion. And also come from a school of thought where you feel personally nothing is impossible. You could do everything. And discrimination has never been felt or happened at home. And then you go over to workplace, most of the time, you don't feel it is there. And many times when you realize it's there, it's either too late or too difficult to go back and undo what you have done. But definitely, is it there? The question, yes, definitely it is there. Is it going to be there? I think it's on all our hands and see how we can contribute our bit to the whole thing. You can definitely say that the glass has been shattered. Has it been broken? I think definitely not. I think it's being there. And all of us, I think, without gender bias, have a role to play. And it's very important for us to play that role to get this behind us.
Yeah, thanks, Jayanthi. And like you rightly said at the end, all of us have a role to play, irrespective of, at which level we are in the organization, especially as we, you grow into leadership position. I think that's important to mentor and support the women around you. So yeah, thank you. Bhavana, why do you think, I mean, we speak a lot about shattering or breaking the glass ceiling, but why, in the first place, why do you think it's important for organizations to have women in leadership positions? Like, why the diversity? What is it different that women bring to the table?
Yeah, I think, importance of women in leadership positions, I would say importance of women in general, and the business case for diversity, I think, is something there's been a ton of papers written about. And to me, important, not just, women from a gender perspective, diversity, but also other forms of diversity, because I think diversity is more a way of thinking, a mindset. And gender is just one way in which we think a different thought process can be brought to the table. So for me, it's important that organizations don't just do lip service in bringing in women at any level, any role, but bringing them in even significant roles. And if we talk about leadership, like you said, it's important that when we are on our journey of improving representation, of diversifying our workforce, if you see women on top, one important piece that happens is women lower down in the organization, entry levels, middle levels, actually see that there is a possibility to get there. So, like we were saying, that yeah, somebody did shatter that so-called proverbial glass ceiling and made it over there. So there is a journey and an aspiration. So the more you can create the aspiration, the more women want to come into the organizations where they see women leaders. I think the other piece also is that, having women in positions where they can influence, for instance, policies, attitudes, ways of working. Of course, this is all apart from, the business of doing business, which we already said, diversity does add value. Uh, we've seen results where more diversified organizations do much better than their peers in the industry. So to me, it's important because women bring in a perspective when it comes to sensitizing the organization around policies, attitudes, etc. When you are in a significant influential position, it's just a little bit more easier to make that difference and hence, kind of pave the path. So it's almost like goodness leads to more goodness, and it's, a virtuous cycle, I would say, which is why it's important. The other thing I think also is, I would really like to say that when you have women as leaders, it kind of displays an intent of the organization that they're serious. So they're not just, just going there hiring for some very stereotypical functions that are associated, that talked about the gender roles. So you assume there are certain roles like for instance, somebody at the reception ideally is great to be a woman, or, the clerical staff because it's low responsibility, I don't have much at stake. It's important that you display the intent that I want to go beyond that. And hence, women in leadership roles speak of that intent. It also brings in, a confidence that you don't have to, and especially, if you have strong women leaders, it kind of gives a very strong message to other women that it's not about, you need to be in a mold. I was talking about the merit trap earlier, like, you display the same characteristics as your male colleagues because you defeated the entire objective of diversity. You need to be your own self. You can't be forever in that mold. And I think the more you see women who are confident, strong, higher than you, the easier it is for you to accept that, yes, I have an aspiration and an ambition that can be met. So to me, several reasons why organizations should have women in leadership roles.
Right, bringing in a different perspective, helping in framing the right policies, and like you said, the intent of the organization to not just have women in, junior or the typical roles, but even in senior leadership positions. And and Jayanthi, like Bhavana said, organizations need to do more than just lip service and, something that fulfills the statutory norms in terms of including women. So, what do you think organizations can specifically do to implement gender diversity, specifically for senior roles? And can you share some examples basis your experience?
We run a recruitment firm, and we specialize in senior management, and diversity as far as gender is concerned is our specialty. So I feel happy to answer this question. When organizations start, it looks like a lip service, definitely, yes. At the beginner levels, at the bottom of the pyramid, gender diversity is almost 50-50, and they're able to get it. Like, for example, when we do a campus, we definitely have a download that it has to be 50-50 and sometimes more women, and we get that done. What happens post that, I think, is a very, very important thing that all of us need to know, keep abreast of. Most of the organizations, including very large Fortune 500 companies, will see that it starts having a pyramid effect where as you are going higher up, it's lesser representation from women and more from men. Various factors to it. Do women opt out of it? The answer is yes, to some extent. Do men relish in it? To an extent, yes. Is there an organization culture? Yes. Is there a history? Yes. So what needs to be done is, I think, have the same firmness like one would have had at the time of recruiting at the bottom end of the pyramid. One key factor would be transparency, and you got to have a very strong management which would keep track of the ratio. I think maintaining the ratio to a large extent, 5-10% is yet okay, but 20-30% is it becomes very, very skewed. So I think corporate culture becomes the first hindrance. One need to say that this is how this organization is going to be. Have very transparent appraisal systems in place. People know what is it that I need to do and where is it that I need to skill myself to get to from point A to point C. Then I think it becomes much more easy. You'll see a lot of examples, like you'll see GE, which is trying to get its workforce to 50-50. Microsoft gives us a premium if we recruit women, like LinkedIn, which was acquired by Microsoft, is at around 49%, getting into 50%. When there is a resolve in the management, it happens. And we definitely need more representation of women in the management itself. What is the pain point and where it gets sort of diluted is when you're on the absolute management, because then it is the board's commitment to ensure the ratios. So I think we need to go up to the board, and Bhavana has been on various boards and she can add to that. They need to have that resolve and commitment to make that happen. And it's definitely happening. It's a lot better. In the last 3 decades, you have seen a great growth. But is it enough? The answer is no. It's yet work in progress.
Right. And like you said, it is top driven, and the management or the board resolve is important in driving this important change. And Bhavana, organizations can do a lot. It could be like what Jayanthi said, policies and having the commitment to include more women. But finally, it's up to also the women to take charge and want to get ahead and advance in their career. So sometimes organizations, of course, have a glass ceiling, but sometimes women have an invisible barrier in mind. So what can women do to, get promoted to senior roles or increase their visibility?
In my mind, everything the men need to do, the women need to do. And maybe some things come easier to men by nature, or at least to majority of men. I wouldn't talk in general. And some things are on the other side tougher for women. So of course, I would say some basics. Yes, you need to work hard. You need to show your intent that you're there and you want to make things happen. You need to back that intent with conviction. So it need not just be, oh yes, I think I want to do this, but there has to be a demonstrated conviction, whether it's in the form of going beyond your stated roles or KPIs, or it may be in the form of just raising your hand, because a lot of times I think women, or at least many of them, assume, and it's just natural that if I'm good enough for it, somebody will come and ask me, or somebody will point out that I'm the right person to take that on. But no, why should we wait for things to happen? Why should we wait to be invited to do something? Why can't we volunteer? A lot of times, and I think there's a lot of data also on this, that for the same job, a man with with an equal amount of capability will just feel much more confident than a woman, with equal capabilities, in order to raise hands. And I think it's time that we actually get out of that mode. And it's okay, you may not be perfect, but as long as you have the drive and the passion for it, raise your hand and put yourself out there, because I think that's very important. And one of the ways in which a lot of women and men do that is actually by actively seeking out mentors. So for them, they use mentors as guides. In fact, I've seen, there's another extreme where people over mentor. So for them, everybody who could kind of bring in their next job is like a mentor. But no, that's not what I'm speaking about. It's more about, seeking guidance or helping, taking somebody's help to kind of think through the possibilities. So I think, as in a nutshell, I would just say that even if organizations are looking to drive their diversity mandate, we should not assume that because we are a certain gender and we are equally capable, it will come our way. One, let's not treat it as an entitlement. Two, let's not assume that somebody somewhere knows and there will be this cosmic revelation that you are the right person. Let's be out there and show what we are made of, what abilities we have. There's there's another side to it. I came across that a lot of times, especially when women are aware of an organization's diversity agenda. So somebody's looking at a promotion, and there's this woman who doesn't want to raise her hand that I think I'm good enough and I'd like to take on this role, which is at a senior level. Why? Because they're like, if I am a gender diverse candidate, that's the reason I will get this, and that's not my true value. It's also a lot of times, when women get on boards nowadays, there's this whole thing that, oh, I will not get on this board just because they need a woman director. I need to know what value I'm bringing to the table. Very true. You need to bring in value to the table because, even if somebody's diversity mandate got your foot in the door, it will not let you stay in the room for long if you're not adding value. So irrespective of the feminist streak, I think we should understand that a lot of people are trying to get women and more women in the fold, whether at the junior levels or like Jayanthi talked about, the efforts or possibilities that could be there for senior levels. But it is as much the onus on us as to make it happen.
And I think it's the inherent nature of most women to not talk about their achievements and not celebrate their success, and that kind of we need to speak more about what we're doing and make ourselves more visible.
Absolutely.
So Jayanthi, did you in your 20 years of experience, 20 plus years of experience in various sectors, did you personally face any biases or challenges, and how did you overcome these?
Interesting question. And while thinking of answers to this, I was having a chat with my daughter and I was saying, I don't think I faced anything. She said, think through. Tell me examples of what happened. And then we were discussing a few things and she was saying, don't you think that is discrimination? So most of the time, like it took me this many years, probably 15 years after I did what I did, to understand that that was a discrimination with the simple chat that I was having today just before the call. Like, for example, I was the regional head in a bank and I was asked to do a country role. I was so happy. I said, fine, I'll do it. And then the letter didn't come. And I was called and I was told, can you try and do this? And is it okay if we give you the designation by end of the year? I was too young, or I was, like I say, I was too tomboyish, and the happiness to do something was more, I was so involved, I didn't realize what was happening. I said yes, and did it, and we did phenomenally well. And when the position came, by that time, I think you realize that what's happening. And I said, no, the idea was to do it, but I'm going to quit. It took me so many, a decade and a plus to understand what happened. And definitely that is a discrimination. I don't think a man in that position would have been told what was told to me. Also, it's not necessarily salary differences, and definitely compensation wise, there was a huge gap between my boss and me. It also happens not only a man, it was also a foreigner. So I think those things are a very, very in thing in our country. I remember my boss, a lady who got promoted to be the global head, and somebody who I knew who was my colleague, and He came and told me, you know, how she got the promotion. And, you know, they do that. And words unsaid. I said, yeah, but it takes two to tango. But when a man gets it, it's okay to be doing anything to get it. So this sort of social stigma attached to a promotion or anything a lady does is very difficult for a lady to take. But I learned a lot from this lady boss of mine. She used to say, it's a man's world. We got to be very clear on it. And you will never cry or have tears in your eyes for whatever anybody says in an organization. Take it the way you need to be taking it. It's the position and it's the designation. It's nothing to do with gender. You want to cry, you go somewhere else and cry, not in front of others. I think those things are very important. And she knew what was happening on her back, and she used to tell very clearly, let anybody say anything. I'm not going to compromise how I feel and my happiness for anybody's sake. Those things, I think it's nice to learn from others' examples than learning it on your own. And in this job, like Bhavana just said, we do a lot of board recruitments, and a lot of women candidates come and ask me or tell me this, that if I'm going to make value add and I'm going to make a difference, I'll take up this job. And sometimes there's a compensation discussion that happens. I have many people who come and ask, you think this is on? Is this industry standard? Some of them even we advise them to not take it up, because if the difference is too high, I think it's definitely a taking advantage situation. We let the candidate walk out of those situations. But previously it used to be more, okay, now women are allowed. Can I do a director's board study or a degree and come back and become a board member? Those things have considerably come down, and people are looking at what they can contribute and confidence. And without comparison, not necessary to compare, I'm a man or a woman, that I can contribute, I think is a very important factor.
Yeah. And though you face these challenges, I think you were lucky also to have a strong female boss who kind of, guided you and set the right perspective for you.
Yeah, definitely, yes. And like I said, most of the time, I don't think you're into what's happening. You don't realize that's what is happening.
Yeah.
And you're okay with it, or you're too busy not thinking about it.
And question to both of you, Bhavana and Jayanthi. So what do you think are the most important things you have learned over the course of your career? And Bhavana, you spent a lot of time in the manufacturing or male-dominated sector. So what were, some of the most important things you've learned?
I guess I'll answer it with respect to the discussion we have, not like learnings in general. So let me not go down that path. I think for me, a big one has been around empathy. And it's taken a while. So, it's not like I was born with it or I had it the day I joined the corporate world. And I think when I say empathy, I was touching upon it a little earlier. We've been in a very patriarchal society for a long time. And I'll give an example. It's hilarious, but it's also very ironical. So I go in a meeting with this official, a very senior person in one of the government establishments, and I have a colleague of mine, a team member. And this individual, first of all, is taken aback that there is a woman who's walked in for the meeting. I don't know, he probably didn't really bother with the Mr. or Mrs. that was against my name when the invite went. But he's taken aback. And thereafter, in the whole discussion, what was to happen was that I would be talking to him. So we're sitting across the table and I have a colleague sitting on my right. And this gentleman would not be able to look at me and respond. So all the responses to my questions were going to my team member, who was a male. And by the end of it, of course, even I was addressing my questions to him because it just seemed more comfortable for our official here to deal with it. Now, for me, that was hilarious when it was happening. but it just taught me that, I just need to not take this to heart, because obviously it didn't feel right? I'm talking to you and you're kind of not even acknowledging me, you're looking in the other direction. But then this individual has never been used to talking to a senior woman. He's probably had some support staff. He's seen, women in the household with certain, and I'm just making this up because obviously I did not like confront him, because it seemed to be something very deep rooted. So for me, empathy is a big one. And it kind of does feel, I mean, when I say it, several of you probably think it's like, this larger than life kind of a persona you want to create. But the truth is, if you live with it, you just have a little more patience and conviction to deal with what comes your way. And I think that's important because, like we've said it already, this is not going to change overnight. It's probably going to take a couple of generations to make a difference if we all keep working hard at it. I think other than empathy, to me, the other piece, and I always, men, women, I find it very important, but women especially, we have a lot of tendency to, take decisions and then wonder whether it was the right decision. Should we follow our heart or should we want to follow our head? Should we tick the boxes, which is more following the head versus following the heart? And then we, walk around with this cross around our necks. Did I do the right thing for the family? Have I dealt with my work-life balance enough to take care of the house and everything else I feel responsible for? Because as women, we just feel so much more responsible for so many things which we are trying to get done. And I think it's just important, follow your heart and don't worry about, what decision you may have taken in the past. It's just worth moving on because at that point in time, that seemed like the best decision. So you took it. So to me, that's a learning which I always keep with me. I'm not saying I'm like the best at executing it all the time. I have a tendency to keep sewing also, but it's something which every time I have the dedication or the conviction for, it does work well for me. And I think last, I'd just like to say, because we're talking about the glass ceiling, it's okay if nobody's tried it before or nobody's gone for it before. And when I say nobody, I'm talking about women. If you've not seen a woman, all the more reason, take the chance with it. There's always a learning that will come out of it. So every experience is worth it. It'll never be the wrong one as long as you learn something from it. Those would be mine, Prajakta. I guess Jayanthi, I'm sure will have lots more to add.
Well said. And empathy is something, that's something doesn't come to us immediately. You said over years to understand, be it empathy with colleagues or with team members. I think that's really important. Jayanthi, what about you? And anything you would like to add to this or your specific learnings?
Definitely. Like Bhavana was saying, sometimes people are ignorant, like simple things in life, like I love driving. And when they see me in a forest or wherever, in a toll gate, they look at it and they say, okay, women. And then they say, okay, go. You when it is to our advantage, I think we love it. When it is not to our advantage, we don't like it. But I think empathy is something we need to have. Also, I think empathy, again, as a word, we think it is for women. Adjustments as a word, we think it is for women in the organization. Try it on men. The results are very good too. They are human beings, end of the day. I think as much as we want certain things to be done, and we should also be willing to do things and see how things work. It's not just being happy with our entitlements, but also our contribution. I think we should be more than willing to put that extra step and contribute.
Yeah, taking that extra step, especially for women, is important. And we spoke a lot about this, Bhavana, like men are mainly in leadership positions, and we said birds of a feather flock together. But what can men do, or male colleagues or leaders do to get more women, in senior roles, especially in leadership positions?
Right. What can men do? I think we've talked so much about, this whole piece around unconscious bias, I think in a big way, whether in the personal or the professional sphere, I think personal is a good place to practice for men. We just need to be, you know, aware. I was going to say conscious of our unconscious biases. That's to me the key. Men, the more, for instance, on the personal front, men are not, you know, weighed down or working with the assumptions that because they've seen women play certain roles, say in the household or in the family, they assume that is how it's going to perpetuate, because that's the assumption which, unless worked against on the personal front, will continue also bothering us on the professional side. So the more, every time I find a man who says, I need to get home because the child is unwell, I'm almost like so happy to hear that. Because that's somebody who's saying, I'm not assuming it's my better half or my wife who's going to do that. I will take the lead in making that happen. Or maybe, we've shared the load or whatever. So I think that's one thing which starts working on mindsets then, because the more a manager hears that, the more the manager is attuned to a work-life balance, which is not a concept for women. It is a concept for the entire workforce, right? On the professional front, I think, like I said, unconscious biases is what we need to be, calling out. It's difficult for me myself to always be aware because it's an unconscious bias, right? The more we see it in others, the more we talk about it. I mean, whether as a group or with friends, the more aware we become of it. And once you're aware of it, it is easier to catch that. I mean, a lot of times, for instance, when at a senior level, you're talking about, let's say, promoting somebody, there's this whole thing around, oh, I don't know that person too well. And I'm like, what is it that you don't know? You've seen performance, you've seen that person do or deliver to targets, etc. The question is, okay, maybe I haven't gone for a smoke with this person or a drink in the evening or, spent time. It's just that that whole piece around familiarity seems to stand more against women versus men. And that's, something we've all seen and heard. But do we realize that's actually what is working against us? And that is something we need to be conscious of. So the more objective we get when we take decisions on whether we're bringing up women, interviewing women, it's almost like, I was reading about this research that happened on, if you blinded the names on the CVs, the chances of a woman being shortlisted for an interview were much higher than if we actually read the name. Now, who would acknowledge or accept that, right? But that is true. That's how it's working. So I think it's important that the conversations and the calling out, and it's important for both women and men to call out the unconscious biases. It just takes a lot of effort and energy to make it happen. But we need to sign up for that, because otherwise we're going to just keep, pecking at it like a woodpecker before the tree falls, and that's going to take eons.
Yeah, and that kind of ties into what Jayanthi was speaking about earlier, is the resolve and the commitment, looking at the ratios and looking at appraisals in a more transparent and objective way. And Jayanthi, we see that specifically in fields of science, technology, and engineering, even in developed countries, there are only, I think, 20 to 25% women in these fields. And in India, in countries like India, it's even lesser. So what can be done to reverse this trend? Because women are mainly in roles which are considered or not considered male dominated. So like even in manufacturing. So what can be done? I think maybe it starts from the education and at the college level or school level itself. What are your views on this?
STEM is very, very interesting and something very, very close to my heart. So happy to talk about it. I think it starts from home. From the time you're born, like they say, girls like toys and boys like cars. So it starts literally from there. And STEM, both in developing countries and developed countries, has gone through a change. Like if you see before 30 years, women, definitely there's a great bias. More men are STEM oriented and women are very less representation in that. Beginning, they were more into science and technology, like you could see in computer engineering, quite a few women coming up. But for the last 30 years, or from 90s, if you see, it is steadily decreasing. There are more women getting into engineering and maths than science and technology. Some of there are good data points available, and I think it's left to all of us to see how we can use this and where our interests are. Like some technologies like nanotechnology, genetic engineering, for example, there are more women than men. It's at around 54% in genetic. Nanotechnology around 30%. Data science, for example, has around 41% in between men and women. But I think with the changing dynamics in the world, what is happening is there are newer technologies that has come up, like AI, machine learning, data analytics, and stuff like that, which does not go so much on how much knowledge you have on the subject or through your education, because when everybody were getting educated, these things were not available as academic studies. And these things change every day. So it's not about how many years of experience you have. Have you done a previous job in this, or are you educated in it? It's more how adaptable you are to the changing environment and how fast you can grasp. So you and me would be on the same platform as of today, and it depends on how much we can pick up and learn. So this is a very, very interesting trend, and this can bring about equality in gender itself. And you'll also notice that women in STEM, women in STEM earn more than 33% than women in non-STEM related jobs. So very, very interesting. There is a bias, definitely, and it is closing in on certain sciences and not closing in on others. Like we have done complete shop floor of women for Daimler. You think at the lower end with shifts, it's very difficult for women to be doing these jobs. We went to the extent of meeting parents and getting them to agree to it, to send girls on shifts. It has been working in Chennai for more than 5-6 years as of today.
This is with Daimler?
It's with Daimler. So I think it's organization's interest and our own efforts. We need, it requires family support. You need to have confidence and resolve to do it. But definitely it's changing dynamics. And with the COVID situation, lot of constraints has been removed. Like you don't have a geographical constraint. You don't have worry about leaving a little one back home. So anywhere in the world, you could work for anybody else. So I think these things are going to change the dynamics to a very, very large extent. And hopefully, if all of us contribute towards it, organizations and people themselves, this ratio can definitely become more narrow.
Yeah. And it's important that you spoke about women on the shop floor, because in manufacturing itself, like women are a rarity, even in not in shop floor positions, but even in senior roles. I think women are not so visible, or there aren't so many women, because even in our company, my sister and I were initially like looked at in a very it was like an anomaly. But today we do have women on the shop floor in various sections. I think that is that we spoke about the optics and the intent of the organization. I think that's really important to reverse this trend.
Yeah.
Bhavana, we spoke about what men can do, but what about, I was reading somewhere that sometimes female leaders themselves have a resistance to promote women team members. So what can women leaders do to coach their team members or support them through maybe formal mentoring programs or some informal coaching?
Yeah, I think just, for a lot of women, sometimes just sharing is important, right? So, I mean, for instance, this discussion that we are having right now, just sharing our thoughts, our views, our experiences. And a lot of times, I think more than formal mentoring, because that comes in the garb of, okay, we have this much time and we need to talk about this and see where this goes. And then we'll meet again, let's say 2 months from now, all of that. I think more than that, just being there to share your own stories rather than sit on a pedestal as a mentor and give wisdom to what may be perceived as mortals who have not yet made it happen. It's important to very transparently share on what it took for you to be where you are. And it's constant, right? I mean,
I think Jayanthi,
to
Bhavna
go there
can't
is
hear you. Jayanthi, can you hear Bhavna?
Yeah, it stopped for a bit, but it came back.
Yeah, Bhavna,
yes,
can you hear me?
yes, I can hear
Yeah,
you.
I think the last sentence we couldn't hear you. If you could please repeat.
So I was just saying, it's like the glass ceiling hasn't really ended. We all are still there, and there may be levels we want to get beyond. So for women to share stories, to share experiences, sometimes is much more powerful than just be mentoring. Because mentoring is, like I said, you're on a pedestal versus, I have seen the same thing, I've experienced the same. Sometimes the strength one gets in hearing that somebody else has also been through it and has overcome it, or there may be like little things you told yourself while you were going through it and made it happen, is very important. So to me, the whole sharing, listening, encouraging, I think that's a much bigger deal than just formal mentoring.
And that was what Rujuta mentioned at the start. One of the purpose of WIN or Women of IACC network is this knowledge sharing or best practice or even experience sharing across sectors, so you can learn and also get inspired. And that's the reason we are having these programs as well. So Jayanti, as a follow-up to that, who are the women leaders you admire? Maybe people you've worked with or...
I love that question. Like I said, being the tomboyish girl that I have always been throughout, my first and foremost always has been Amelia Earhart. She definitely didn't know there was a glass ceiling. She shattered all of it, and she went beyond the skies, I think. And in 1820s and 1830s, right, when even today we talk about whether women can fly, and we have the first women pilot in a fighter jet and stuff like that. 100 years back, somebody could do that. So she's definitely my heroine always. Closer to home, if we could bring around some examples. Before that, I just wanted to share, when there are jobs which we consider men's job and there are jobs which we consider women's job, and if a man does a women's job, it is looked at as a wow factor, and if a lady does a man's job, it's not looked at in a positive fashion. There's a social stigma attached, and everybody looks at it like, okay, she is going to manage, and somehow she is going to manage. So with that as a background, Kiran Bedi is one of my favorites. She did a man's job, and she did it much better than everybody else. She was there right on the roads. Even today, you see her walking in Pondicherry streets, chasing people away who are parked wrong to whatever it is that she wants to fight for. But I thought she showed some fabulous courage in the job. It was completely men dominated. It wasn't easy for her to be there, and to be there in the capital of this country is not been easy thing. And of course, Jayalalitha. all that could go wrong with a girl to a lady to a woman went wrong with her, and nothing deterred her. Excellent orator. Um, she must have done things that might have not gone well or gone negative for what happened to her in her life. But anytime all her data points were there on time in her fingertips, she didn't have to look at any paper, any statistics for her to talk what it was. A great administrator.
Right. And you spoke about a woman pilot. In fact, I remember one of the flights, there was a woman pilot when they announced the name, and the gentleman next to me, it was such a, like a instant reaction, his expression, oh, woman pilot. Like, and in this day and age.
Are we going to land?
Would you like to add to that, Bhavana? Any women leaders you admire, you admire and you'd like to share with us?
I actually take characteristics from different people. So there are different things I admire in different, sometimes it's resilience. I actually wouldn't even name, personalities who are famous, rich and famous, or established and famous. I think I have people closer home, like literally home, who have been, in their own way, supporting, caring, pushing the limits. So yes, between my mother-in-law, and my sister, I look at them as people I really look up to for what they have achieved.
So coming to, I think, questions from the audience. There's a point from the audience, and that's well taken. They're saying, why only women talking about this? We need to get the men's perspective as well. So point well noted. I think from the next session onwards, we would like to include, men's perspective as well. Bhavana, there's a question for you. I think you covered it, but I'll just read it out. Gender diversity brings a great perspective in decision making, and it also demonstrates the character of an organization. However, employees need to speak without fear and are unable to speak without being judged or without being judged. How do they, especially at the junior level, how do women employees overcome that?
So I think an organization which has demonstrated its conviction to drive diversity is definitely with a set of people who have it in them to make it happen. A lot of times what happens is, especially when diversity starts the tone is set at the top, it takes a while for it to flow through the organization. And so what happens is, and which is what I was saying earlier, you bring in women at the lower levels, there's nobody above them for them to look up to or even sometimes have the conversations with. And that's where the problems are. So that's where organizations have retention issues. Yeah. So to me, when you, and I come back to the whole point around, empathy. When an organization has started this journey, yes, and you are among the first few who have been there, you can do two things. You can be part of that journey and plow through it, or you can say, you know what, it's not worth my time and I will move out. And I'd like to share an example, which is me. When I first joined the manufacturing engineering space in 2003, my organization was 7% women. When I left them 14 years, much more than that, 15 years later, they were 30% plus women. Now, if at that point in time I had come across biases, I did two things. One, I called them out. If you have the fear in you, to be honest, then it's probably something that you need to overcome. We ourselves are responsible for it. There's nobody who's going to make it happen. Let's not wait for a support structure that will come in our way. Of course, your support structure may be outside, people you want to talk to, just as a sounding board. A lot of times women are just looking for sounding boards. But I think the other is also you need to reach out to who are those people who are driving this mandate and who are enabling this. And it's important to get to that level. And it's within you to make it happen. Like I said, there's nobody who's going to serve it on a platter. We have to push ourselves if we think it's worth it. If we don't think it's worth it, if we don't want to be the ones who are breaking the glass ceilings, we'd rather walk in where the ceiling's already broken and we'll make it. Fair enough. You probably miss the satisfaction of being the first out there, but fair enough. I mean, it's a personal preference that we have.
Yeah. Right. And Jayanthi, question for you, like how can women deal with perceptions of being aggressive or bossy? Like even if a woman is assertive, she is sometimes labeled as being aggressive. So how, and is judged a little more harshly than the male counterparts. So what's your, how do women deal with that perception?
No, I think definitely that's there, and you'll see a lot of us contribute towards it. Like women, like we've seen movies like Women Wear Prada, where if you're aggressive, you're shown as the devil. Simple things. I think it also starts, a lot of things starts from home, which we don't realize. Like, for example, I think we had the most famous soap opera happening, Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, and the largest number of, I think 95% more of women watched that serial. And you know, there are a lot of things that we don't do anything about, that stays in our head. I think one, I think within the organization, everybody feels that a lady is somebody who thinks from the heart and a man is somebody who thinks from the mind. To set the expectations right is very important. What is acceptable and what is not acceptable is very, very important for a person to manage, and to drive it down the organization, saying this is how things would work, I think is a very important factor. But definitely the expectation from a lady is to be more lenient is the word. So they think women can be lenient. It is a perception, but it takes a bit of time to put things in perspective and say that these are the terms and this is how it would work.
Yeah.
So, in fact, Prajakta, on the previous question for whoever asked it, the time you would want to put out your point of view without fear, you may probably get labeled as being aggressive. Issue is most people are not able to draw the distinction between being assertive and aggressive. And there's only so much you can explain to people beyond that.
Absolutely. We do have a couple of more questions, but I think in the interest of time, I think it's past 5 o'clock. So we would have to close the session since we can't take any more questions. But thank you so much, Bhavana and Jayanthi. This was an interesting and inspiring session for us. So thanks to both of you for participating today. Thank you to all our participants who took the time out. I hope everyone's found it helpful. And thank you to our secretariat, Rakhi, Sikka, and Sujata, and all the others in our IACC Mumbai and Pune office. Thanks, Rujuta, for the welcome, and have a great evening ahead, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you to all.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.